Achewillow, Season 3, Chapter 2, Our Ghosts and Demons. I don't know where the drink came from. One moment, I was staring at the treetops from my vantage point on the ground. The next, there was a red plastic cup in my hand. Then again, the ground could have split open right next to me, and an entire school bus worth of clowns could have spilled forth from the crevice, and the whole spectacle would have gone unnoticed. Nothing could really compare to what I'm looking at now. Glorious, multicolored stars fly in formation, floating impossibly high to the top of enormous firs, breaking apart to each perform their own choreography before floating back down like snowflakes. My brain wanted to interpret it all as a natural phenomenon. That's what rational minds do. We see something inexplicable and immediately assign whatever familiar pattern we can to it. At the same time, there's a sentience to the lights that I simply can't ignore. They move like swarms of insects or flocks of birds, but without the mechanical purpose of either. They're not migrating or flying off to protect the hive. No, there's an unmistakable artistry to what these lights are doing. The same way you can tell the difference between homemade mac and cheese and garbage from a restaurant. It's such a subtle quality, but one that's hard to debate. I should talk to Gulliver, confirm he's seeing what I'm seeing. Instead, I lower myself carefully to the ground, sitting cross-legged with the plastic cup held in my lap. My neck hurts from staring up, but I can't pull my eyes away. The cup somehow makes its way to my lips and I take a sip. It's a boozy drink. Very boozy. I almost immediately spit it out, surprised by the sting on my lips and the burn on my tongue. It breaks the spell, and I'm back in the clearing. The music's electronic song shakes the ground, and the group of bodies dancing to its rhythm are back. The lights are still there. I didn't hallucinate them, but they're no longer keeping me hypnotized. I pull the cup close to my chest, feeling embarrassed by my trance and my reaction to the alcohol. Mango! The voice barely manages to pierce through the chaos of sound and sight, but I hear it, young and fresh. Pardon? I ask, just trying to make sense of the word. It's mango juice, the voice answers before its owner plops herself down next to me. But you need to stir it a bit, otherwise all you get is vodka. She puts her pinky finger, rings and all, knuckle deep into my cup and swirls it around a few times before pulling it out and sucking the liquid off. The girl looks like a slice of nostalgia. She doesn't look like she belongs in Achewillow, but rather like she might have been from Montreal, or even New York, for that matter. Not one of the fancy Manhattan or Griffintown kids, though. She might be a little curvier than fashionable, but she pulls off a sort of punk chic that I would have envied in my mid-teens. Boldly colored pink hair with no hint of her roots showing, and a few choice earrings that accentuate her best features. Mostly, it's her confident smile that hits me. I wish I'd been half that outgoing with strangers when I still lived in the city. Taste it. I take a fresh sip, and wouldn't you know it, the drink hits my taste buds just right. It's refreshing, but with a bit of a bite. I've had dozens, probably hundreds of drinks just like that before. Ice, cheap vodka, and whatever juice was 2 for $1 at the grocery store that day. Student punch, we used to call it, but I'm sure every school has its name for it. Yet, after over an hour of trekking through this cold November night, sugar and alcohol goes down so wonderfully well. Not bad, I mumble, looking around for Gulliver. Petunia, though most people call me Pete. Your friend's over there. She points deeper into the clearing where Gulliver is dancing. It's quite the sight, too. Drink in his hands, legs twisting to the beat, he's got more moves than I would have expected of him. A few other kids have gathered around him, clapping and dancing. He looks like he's having the time of his life. He almost looks at home. Miriam, I answer, a little belated. Oh, I know. Pete takes a long sip out of her own plastic cup. The redness in her copper cheeks shows even under the multicolored lights. She's either drunk, cold, or both. I've had your coffee and pastries. Obviously. She giggles and puffs her cheeks, making her face look round. Definitely both. Don't say that. I start, but where do I go from there? Psh, Pete interrupts, nudging me with her shoulders. I say what I want, Ms. Dufour. Don't worry about me. I ain't a supermodel, but that doesn't stop me from being the hottest piece at this party. For a second, I'm stuck admiring that young woman. She does radiate a comfort and confidence I've only ever seen in people like Gulliver and Olivia. I'd be tempted to add Helen Edna to that short list, but her attitude is less about confidence and more about programming. Wait, Ms. Dufour? What am I, 50? Not at all. She laughs, but quickly gets a little quiet as the song shifts from a quick beat to something a little slower. It's just, we're all high school and college kids, and you own the freaking Achewillow Cafe. That's a big deal here. How so? Didn't you just hear me? High school and college students. You sell coffee and cookies. You might as well be a goddess. You're Dionysus to our wine and Demeter to wheat. It's my turn to laugh. I remember having a crush on the barista of the local Second Cup during my first year of CJEP. This scrawny kid with a bad complexion who never once got my name right, but he was the gateway to the caffeine I needed. And he was 3 years older, too. It's funny how, just a little while ago, I was terrified, frustrated, and contemplating going back home. My foot is still cold and sodden, but I'm having a much easier time ignoring it now. I wiggle my toes and feel the waterlogged sock between them. The walk back is going to be agonizing, but it's hard to care about that. Maybe it's the vodka. Hey, I say, breaking the silence. You peckish? Do I look like someone who's ever not peckish? I pull out the thermos full of warm soup and pour some into the lid. We both sit there on the cold ground, staring at the dancers, those made of flesh and those made of light, and I'm reminded how fun it can be to sometimes just enjoy the company of strangers. Though, I suppose I should have known Pete if she's been at the cafe. I guess I need to pay better attention to the students who frequent my establishment, especially if I want to be a worthy successor to Doris. Pretty, aren't they? Petunia muses out loud while handing me back the thermos lid. Yeah, what are they? Pete shakes her head. Her bubbly grin thins down to a contemplative smile. I can see the colored light reflected in her large brown eyes. They're like fireworks on the water. I don't know. Jordan says he touched one once and that they're like warm clouds. They're just here once in a while during the fall, and they kind of react to the music, and they dance with us. Aren't you afraid they're dangerous? More dangerous than what we could run into at a club or bar? It's a fair question. Everyone here seems to be having a good time. The lights feel more like props for the party than they do a threat. Not that I'm an expert or anything, but they certainly don't give off a demonic vibe. Meanwhile, I've seen some pretty sick things happen in Montreal clubs with some predators that make the hunger demon seem like a puppy. No, I suppose not. Your friend's one hot piece of ass, by the way. The non sequitur is both surprising and hilarious. I'm sorry, what? The guy you came here with. Pete points to Gulliver, who's doing some intimidating gyrations with his hips that a lot of girls seem to be impressed with. Look at him. That boy looks like he's all abs and glutes. Yeah, well, that man is probably a little old for you. This vodka's a little old for me. Ain't keeping my lips from tasting it. Don't worry, Ms. Dufour. I've already got a man. I'm just admiring, I laugh again, a little less confident. I wonder if Gulliver is aware what the age range is here and if he's just having fun dancing. Maybe I should go check on him, tell him to rein in that pelvis a little. Now, if you want something that's definitely too old. Pete nudges me again, almost spilling the soup I'm pouring into the lid. She points to the edge of the clearing, not too far from where Gulliver and I arrived. It takes me a moment to spot who she's talking about. The crowd isn't that thick, but it's a tight clearing, and the kaleidoscope of colors and noise makes it hard to pick out unfamiliar faces. When I do spot him, though, it becomes impossible not to see the guy. He's short. Not as short as Orleans, who I almost tower over, but not that much taller than I am either. He's got thinning blonde hair that looks like a puff of color-shifting cotton candy. He's wearing a Canada Goose knockoff jacket that makes him look like a kid whose mother dressed him up for the depth of winter. There's a look on his face that walks the tightrope between confused and awestruck. Whoever he is, I've never seen him in Achewillow. He walks deeper into the clearing, his neck craned up and looking at the same treetops that had enthralled me when I arrived. However, where I stood dumbfounded, this guy immediately starts fumbling with his wool mittens so he can reach into a fanny pack and pull out a camera. "Oh no," Pete murmurs. But it's too late. The new guy points his camera to the sky. His finger pushes down on the button and... click. Then the lights all vanished, and we were left in the dark with the music. I finish recounting the events of the prior night to my breakfast crowd. It's my usual people. Olivia, who's just about to leave with her coffee and breakfast sandwich. Judging by her smart dress and coiffed hair, I'm guessing she's hitting the road to meet with clients. Cider business must be doing well. There's Gulliver, who's nursing a hangover with what I can only guess is his 5th refill of black coffee. Helen Edna is there too, taking a rare break from her office hours to enjoy some time at my counter. I told them the story, keeping a few details to myself. Mostly my nearly frostbitten foot and the name of my new friend. I also made a point not to dwell on the ages of Gulliver's admirers and spare him from Olivia's inevitable teasing. However, they'd recommended that I investigate the Donsolites, and I did. To their credit, this was exactly what little Miriam Dufour needed. Something interesting and mysterious to gnaw on, but also harmless and wonderful, so I'd maybe fall in love with Achewillow again. After all, there's only so many deaths and demons a town can throw at you before you start to think the relationship is a little one-sided. So the teenagers in Achewillow go out at night to dance with some kind of weird luminous phenomena? Helen asks, raising her cup to her thin lips. Seems irresponsible. Gulliver leans in to look at the notary public. Yeah, they're teens. What did you expect, Helen? It's Ms. Edna to you, Mr. Kemper. These two look like they're in the mood to go at it again, but thankfully Olivia is there to keep the peace. All it takes is an exasperated tisk, and both Gulliver and Helen sit back on their stools without a further word. Do you know what the lights are, Olivia? Nah. She shakes her head before wrapping a thick wool scarf around her neck. Think I'd send you chasing a red herring? But you knew they were harmless, right? Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have thrown you at some other demon either. I ain't no monster, Miriam. Stefan would disagree, I think, but I keep that remark to myself. Honestly, I say, it all seems so remarkably harmless that even if I'm curious, I'm not sure I want to spend much time demystifying it. I pour more coffee in Gulliver's newly empty mug before I go on. I think I'll check Doris's notes, but if I don't find anything, I might let this one rest. You ain't gonna find anything in Doris's notes, Olivia says with confidence. She was as vexed with these lights as anyone who's ever wondered for a second what they were. Never got it figured out either. She sounds so sure. In fact, Olivia, who always seems to know just a little more than she's ready to share, was the one to suggest I go out to look for the lights in the first place. Gulliver was my guide because he'd seen them before, but it was her idea, and so far, nothing I've said about the Donsolites seems to surprise her. So, you don't know anything. Girl, if I knew a damn thing about these lights, why would I tell you to go running through the woods to find out? I don't know, to stop me from moping around the cafe and worrying about demons? Miriam, you make me out to be far more devious than I really am. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have ice cider to sell. Wait, I try to stop her. You guys are making ice cider? But she's already gone. Out into the sunny morning, waving goodbye with that smile that says, I'll tell you later. Which she better. There's a long list of things I could pair a good ice cider with, and my mind is just about to go down that rabbit hole, the explosion of possibilities that's like an ambrosia to the creative mind, when the door swings open again. I expect to see Ian, here for his daily order of croissants. Or it could be either of the mayors, or even Detective Lamore stopping by for one of his rare indulgences. On a weekday, it should be one of my regulars, or at least one of the familiar faces I can't put a name to yet. Maybe it's Petunia, probably hungover. If that's the case, maybe I'll whip her up something special. But it's not a familiar face, or rather, not one that's local. In fact, it's the face of an intruder. It's the curious but confused eyes of the man who killed last night's dance. There's this oblivious quality to his expression that marks him as a hapless tourist. The way he looks around the interior of the Achewillow Cafe, like it's some curiosity or attraction. He might as well be visiting the biggest ball of yarn in Minnesota with that look on his face. I half expect him to pull out his little camera again, and as he clicks his first photo, all my patrons vanish like the lights in the woods, leaving me with the easy-listening folk rock over the speakers and that dumpy little tourist of a man. I can still hear the DJ moaning about the party crashers ruining a perfectly good evening, and although Gulliver and I had started the night in miserable conditions, agreeing with him. I'm not a party girl, and Mother knows the teens and young adults aren't exactly my demographic, but I was having a good time. I was relaxing. Even under these ghostly lights, things felt normal. Then this idiot showed up, tried to snap a photo, and it all disappeared like a magical carriage at midnight. It felt like the whole world had shut down, and even with the music still blaring, everything went quiet. We weren't plunged into darkness. We were sucked into a vacuum. He walks towards the counter, and when his eyes connect with mine, his face explodes into the happiest smile I've seen on a client since that time I made a strawberry trifle with balsamic dressing and basil leaves. Like some robot programmed for customer service, which I guess I kind of am by now, I reply with a smile of my own. He sits down, dropping a pile of papers and a handful of pens on the counter, slinging his bag over the back of the stool. His head is mounted on a swivel as he swings it around this way and that, looking around the cafe. For a second, I'm almost taken in by his childlike wonder and the pure joy writ on his red, freckled features. "Hey there, I struggle to keep a facade of politeness. What can I get you?" Hands pressed on the counter, he leans in to get a good look at the line of various drinks and breakfasts his fellow patrons are enjoying. His tongue passes over his lips in anticipation of what his mind has already settled on before he speaks in a grating, obnoxious tone. "Oh, wow. I think I'll have one of those chocolate muffins. Is that chocolate? That's a muffin, right? Not a cupcake? I'm trying to watch what I eat." I bite my tongue before explaining that there's probably more calories in a muffin, especially the decadent kind of chocolate chunk chocolate sponge muffins I make. "Coming right up," I say, in a cheerful voice that belies my actual annoyance. "Anything to drink?" "Oh yeah," he says, already sorting through his pile of pamphlets and flipping through his notebook. "Coffee? Black. Do you have any orange juice? I need my vitamins. With winter coming and all the traveling and the virus and all that, I want my vitamin C." "Sure." The muffin is on a plate with a napkin in no time, but the cup of coffee is another issue. The monstrous coffee machine is even more combative than usual on this one, hissing and spitting and damn near burning my right pinky off with a jet of magma-hot steam. I guess it doesn't like him either. "So," Gulliver starts to say, "how did your picture come out?" I know that tone from Gulliver. It's not one I hear often. My friend is usually of such a jovial nature. His laugh is loud and infectious, and few things can poke a hole in his easygoing mood. Almost nothing. When we first met, I accused him of being a serial killer, and that didn't sit too well with him. Helen Edna seems to be the most skilled at plucking a reaction out of him. But otherwise, all smiles and eating sugar. That's our Gulliver. It takes a moment for the stranger to put the pieces together, and for the time it takes him to do so, he frowns, making me notice how small his eyes are on his face. "Oh, yeah, I remember you. Sorry, the photo was overexposed. Just a big white mess. I didn't get you or your friends, or the lights." The guy looks genuinely disappointed, but equally oblivious to what he did. It's hard to admit, but maybe his was an honest mistake. Who am I to criticize him for being where he didn't belong? Gulliver and I clearly had no business there either. "Here you go." I slide the muffin and coffee in front of him, pushing aside a box with stylized wings drawn on top. I'll get your orange juice in a second. What's this? He takes a bite out of his muffin, leaving black crumbs all over his lips in the process. His voraciousness puts Gulliver's to shame. You'd think he was afraid I'd snatch his breakfast away if he didn't lay claim to it as soon as possible. Those? He damn near spits half his muffin back at me while talking. I got them from a guy outside. With careful but eager fingers, he pulls the box open, exposing a pair of colorful wings pressed between two pieces of glass, perfectly preserved and ready for display. Fairy wings, he says with unbridled joy. There's a moment of incredulous silence at the counter. Only the creaking of Gulliver's stool and the music in the air reminds me that I haven't gone deaf. He's a child. Sir, Helen Edna, Notary Public, speaks up with authority. Those are butterfly wings. A blue morpho, I'd guess. A flash of disappointment passes over his features, but it melts almost immediately. Well, the man outside sells them as fairy wings. That just means you've been had, Helen digs down. The man lifts the piece of glass to his eyes, then to the window, letting light filter through it and catch on the colorful wings. I'm not sure if he's examining his purchase or deciding what he wants them to be, but after a few seconds, he ends up firmly on the fence on the subject. Well, he says, maybe. We'll see. They're very interesting regardless. Helen shakes her head in exasperation, preferring to sip on her drink rather than belabor the point. Right. Let me get your juice, Mr. Oh. The man tears himself away from his fairy wings and digs into his pocket, producing a business card. Name's Thomas Sinclair, host of the Stranger Limits podcast. The way he says it, it's like he's expecting or hoping that someone in attendance will recognize his name or his podcast, which is an absolutely ridiculous idea. Achewillow is a tiny little town. I don't want to call it backwards, but we do tend to be a little old-fashioned. Stranger Limits! Gulliver damn near yells at the top of his considerable lungs. I knew I recognized that voice. I stand corrected. The next hour is spent listening to Gulliver and this Thomas Sinclair talk about what must be the dumbest things I've ever heard of. The logo on the business card says it all. It features the silhouette of a Bigfoot lit by a beam emanating from the bottom of a flying saucer. It looks very professional and so incredibly amateur at the same time, like a big-budget school play. No expense spared to put forth some very mediocre talent. This is what Thomas Sinclair does, apparently. He talks about conspiracies, cryptids, monsters, ghosts, and aliens on the internet. And somehow, because of people like Gulliver, I suppose, he can make a living out of it. 2 years ago, Gulliver says, sounding every bit the fanboy, I called about a ghost I saw on Auto Route 35 at night. Ghost moose? Thomas says, apparently remembering. Your ghost moose? Yeah, that was me. I reported the ghost moose. The way Gulliver jumps from his stool, all 300 pounds of muscles on him, I'm worried he'll either rip the seat out from the floor or flip my beautiful wooden countertop to the ground, along with everything on it. Man, do you have any idea how many phone calls and emails I got about ghost moose and ghost deers on the highway after that call? That story's a legend on the show. No. Gulliver waves his hand in a dismissive fashion. Is he blushing? You're the legend, Thomas. Your shows are the best. Perfect marriage of information and entertainment. Is it true you once almost ran over Art Bell at a convention? An hour of this. Gulliver has become like a second brother to me over the last year, but right now, I would gladly put him in the coffee grinder, along with his new boy crush. Helen, I ask, what's going on? Oh, this? This is how it feels to listen to you and Olivia talk about apple pies, apple fritters, apple crumble, apple butter, apple tarts, apple pie. Okay, I get it. Is that really how I am with food? I can't possibly be that annoying, can I? I mean, I do nerd out about food, After all, I'm a kitchen witch from a long line of kitchen witches. It's in my genes. It's who I am. Gulliver isn't just weird, disturbing information about alien abductions and urban legends, is he? Except he is. That's the first thing I learned about Edmund Gulliver Kemper. He spends all his time driving his truck while listening to books and podcasts about true crime, serial killers, monsters, and legends. Listening to him and Thomas talk is the same conversation I would have with Anthony Bourdain, except the language is alien abductions instead of international cooking. They're nerds nerding out. But boy, is it hard to listen to from this side of the conversation. So, what are you doing in Achewillow? Gulliver finally asks. Which, when you give it a moment's thought, is the dumbest question you could ever ask someone like Sinclair, isn't it? In fact, shouldn't there be a dozen people just like him swarming Achewillow on any given day? Or maybe the little mysteries of Achewillow are obvious to me because of who I am and what I do, but they're still a secret to the rest of the world? A little over a year ago, I'd never even heard of the place. Research, of course, Thomas answers, seeing the bottom of his mug with disappointment. I saw on some UFO forum that there was a phenomenon called the Donselites happening here during the fall. I made it a Patreon goal on the podcast and boom, here I am, in the field, investigating. How come I didn't hear about that on the podcast? Gulliver sounds almost insulted that he wasn't kept abreast of everything happening at Stranger Limits HQ. I don't know, are you up to date? We changed hosting and the feed's been a little wonky the last 2 months. Oh, maybe I need to refresh my RSS reader? Nerds. I pour some fresh coffee into Thomas's mug and pick up his empty plate. Is that why you were taking photos in the woods last night, Mr. Sinclair? He nods his thanks for the coffee and picks up the now burning hot mug. Oh, please, call me Thomas. And yeah, I was trying to gather evidence, but I must have mistaken the party for those lights. I'll probably be going out again tonight to see if I can find them. Do you guys know anything about those lights? If I could broadcast my thoughts directly into Gulliver's mind, he would have heard me screaming like an unhinged banshee to keep his fool mouth shut. The whole time since last night, I was convinced that this man, this Thomas Sinclair, knew what it was he'd seen in the woods. When he pulled out his business card and started explaining about his podcast, I was certain he was on to the mysteries of Achewillow. I'm not sure why I'm so protective of these secrets, but the idea of this outsider coming into our community and poking his nose into every ghost story and every demonic manifestation rubs me the wrong way. Sure, there are horrors from beyond the grave that have cost lives and made me positively miserable over the last 14 months. Maybe I almost lost my life to a hunger demon. Maybe my heart was broken by a couple of lust demons. But they're our ghosts and demons. And these Donselites are ours too. Or more specifically, they belong to the teens and students of Achewillow. Not this 40-something balding weirdo that makes a living screaming about the Loch Ness Monster on the internet. His ignorance, his beautiful, incredible, and unlikely ignorance is a blessing like a fragile crystal ball. Now, Thomas Sinclair has tossed that ball into the air, and I have to rely on clumsy Gulliver to catch it in his awkward hands and not drop it to shatter on the ground. It's rather a desperate hope. Gulliver is a smart guy, but not a very attentive one. Social cues tend to walk all over his face without his notice. I doubt that my angry stare will register enough for him to get the message. Fortunately, he doesn't have to. Thomas's precious ball of ignorance is suddenly intercepted by other hands. The chimes on the door of the Achewillow Cafe sing their song and 2 new customers walk in. Their mere presence is enough to distract and derail, to move the conversation aside just enough that Gulliver never answers Thomas Sinclair's question. But what really pushes everything off the proverbial rails is who these 2 clients turn out to be. Hey there, Ms. D. Remember me? The guy I barely recognize. I think it's the DJ from last night. The girl, however, is Petunia. Achewillow is written by J.F. Dubois and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Achewillow to donate. Achewillow has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Achewillow for details. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Achewillow.